Okay, and again, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to some of you. My name is Kevin Ezel. I am the Senior Director of Graduate Programs here in the College of Business at Lehigh University. So again, for those that are here live today and for those that are watching this on recording, first off, thank you for your time. I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me to talk a little bit about your application or your potential application to one of our MBA or specialty master's programs here at Lehigh. One of the things that I always try to do when I have a session like this is to try to add value, not just tell you what's on the website, but also to kind of tell you what I've seen through my experiences being at Lehigh for 6 years in this office and with about 20 years experience working with post-traditional and graduate students at a number of different colleges and universities. So I believe in kind of getting something out of this, practical, hands-on components that I think will hopefully strengthen your application and give you some direction. So we will go through the application in general, but I will give you some tips throughout the process. One thing I always mention that for some of you, you maybe have identified Lehigh as one of your top schools for an MBA or specialty master's. Others, you may just be starting that process. But where I tend to like to begin this is to talk a little bit about accreditation. So at the bottom left there, you can see the blue logo of the AACSB accreditation. That is something that Lehigh University has in the College of Business. So that covers all of our MBA and specialty master's programs. And typically, less than 6% of business schools in the world have that accreditation. So, why is that important to you as a prospective student? A number of things. It holds us very accountable to an updated and current curriculum where we're bringing in people from the outside to be assessing that curriculum to make sure it's relevant, to make sure it's current. In addition, it's also really focused on the quality and the level of faculty that are teaching in the program. And one thing that people don't know sometimes is that on the back end, from a recruiting standpoint, meaning that from like corporate recruiting standpoint, some of the top multinational companies really begin their search for talent at AACSB accredited schools. So I think it's on people's radar sometimes as they're thinking of programs, but it is really an important component when you are looking at MBA or specialty master's programs. And it's awesome. I see some of you using the chat already. So here I'm going to ask you, if you haven't done so already, if you could just kind of introduce yourself in the chat room. Feel free to tell us whatever you'd like, but I'm really interested in where you're zooming from today, as well as kind of your program of interest at Lehigh. And I can review those while people are kind of chatting in here. So on the MBA side of things, we have what's called our one-year MBA or one MBA, which is our full-time MBA program. We have a part-time online flex MBA program, and that's really designed for students that are kind of already within the United States working full-time and looking to go to school either online or in the evenings while continuing to work. In the specialty master's space, we have a master's in business analytics. We have a master's in management that's really designed for non-business undergraduates, but for international students, sometimes we do have some exceptions there. And then we have some pretty technical kind of niche programs like a master's in financial engineering, master's in applied economics. So a number of different specialty programs. So I'm getting to see here where people are zooming in from, which is amazing. Lehigh is very much both a local and global place. We have students that grew up here in the Lehigh Valley, but then as you can see today, we see students from Ghana and Nigeria, London, Easton, very close, Nicole, Jamaica, Colombia, Mumbai. Wonderful, great to see that background of everybody. And again, what we'll do today is if you have questions throughout, feel free to to kind of chat in and I won't address those immediately, but I'll make sure I cover those. So again, for those that are Lehigh Valley natives or in the Lehigh Valley or the surrounding area, forgive me for a moment here. As you can see, we do get students from all over the place. So I don't like to assume people know that much about the area. So Lehigh University, we're located in the city of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And what students really in our full-time programs attracts them to Lehigh is number one, the quality of the school. Lehigh was recently ranked in the top 15 schools by the Wall Street Journal. Our programs, you'll see some rankings here in a moment as well too. But for our full-time programs, students that are really relocating to the Bethlehem area, they like the proximity to large metropolitan areas. So we're about a 90-minute drive from New York City, give or take with traffic, 60-minute drive to Center City, Philadelphia, give or take a little bit of traffic. But we're a small city. We're in a growing area of Pennsylvania. But the city itself of Bethlehem is about 70,000 people. So for our full-time students, the benefit to that is if you're looking to study in a smaller city setting, which is going to have lower cost of living than a New York or Philadelphia, but you have access to large metropolitan areas, which is where many of our full-time students end up after graduation. And that's really our sweet spot or niche as far as the program goes. For those that are interested in the Flex MBA program, which again is a part-time online program, what's really interesting about Flex, and I think you see it here a little bit in the chat, is that while students can really do it anywhere, if you drew a 100-mile radius around the Lehigh campus, about 80 to 85% of our Flex MBA students live and work in that area. So from a networking standpoint, even if you're looking to do the Flex MBA online, you're going to be having network connections with students, in Lehigh, Northampton, Montgomery County, Delaware County, Berks County, et cetera. And then you'll have a couple outliers of people that are coming in from New England, but the majority of students are relatively local for the Flex MBA program. A little bit more about Bethlehem. We're super excited about this. We were actually just named the most recent UNESCO World Heritage Site. We're one of 26 World Heritage Sites in the United States, and I believe one of 3 in Pennsylvania. So our city center in North Bethlehem has a very old, from the United States standpoint, very old industrial quarter that was named part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So incredibly excited about that as it'll kind of grow our tourism and name recognition in the United States. We're also one of the fastest growing regions in the Northeast, and a lot of that is based on proximity to large metropolitan areas. And the Lehigh Valley in general, where we don't like to overlook this area because we do have some students that are ending up staying locally and getting jobs out of our full-time programs. We actually have the 65th highest economic output of metropolitan areas in the United States, and that's over 384 different metropolitan areas in the United States. So it really is, for those that live here, I lived here for close to 20 years. It's really been quite a transformation where Bethlehem is at the moment. Again, I'm going to spend most of the time today on the application, which is pretty similar for all of the programs that you are interested in today. But I do just like to touch on each program because I want to make sure you all realize some of the direction, some of the requirements, whether it be work experience, whether it be what you studied previously. So I do always like to touch on that. So we'll run through this real quick here. Again, our one MBA is our full-time MBA program at Lehigh University. So if you are an international student that will be studying on an F1 visa, or a J1 visa, you will be wanting to look at our one-year MBA, not our Flex MBA program. Our one-year MBA is full-time, residential, on campus. It begins in late June of 2025, so there's only one start period per year, and then you would graduate typically around 12 to 13 months after that program. That is a STEM designated program as well, too, just to make you aware. Again, our Flex MBA, it's our largest program. We have about 250 part-time students, a combination of students physically coming to campus in the evening, and then some students live streaming in. What I mentioned about Flex when I talk to prospective students is how we differentiate ourselves is we are a synchronous online program. So to paint a picture for our people that are interested in Flex is you physically have some students in the classroom. Obviously, the faculty member is there in the classroom. a distance learning technician is sitting in the classroom, and then kind of wrapped around the room is flat screen TVs where our online students are live streaming into class. Again, designed for part-time students. You have the flexibility to, if you always want to live stream in, that's fine. If you want to do a combination over a semester, completely up to you. But from an online standpoint, it is live, whereas most MBA programs, online MBA programs, it's more what we call asynchronous, watching videos, posting to discussion boards. So that definitely differentiates our program if you're that type of learner. Our Master's in Management, STEM designated, full-time program, begins every fall, so late August, really designed for early career. So students with really 0 to 1 year experience. A lot of the students are coming right from undergrad into our Master's in Management. And again, the majority of those students did not study business. Maybe it was engineering, maybe it was computer science, maybe it was psychology. Some international students, we may have some flexibility if you studied business, but for the most part, we're typically looking for non-business students with 0 to 1 year experience. Our Master's in Business Analytics is our largest specialty master's program. Again, a full-time on-campus program. We have some flexible starts with this program, so you can begin in spring, summer, and fall. And there are different pathways to finish the program anywhere in a year to 18 months. Some of that can depend on when you begin the program. Some of it can also be based on your personal preference, depending if you want to finish it in a year or if you want to extend it a little bit. Financial engineering is again a full-time program, STEM designated. It is typically not offered online, to be honest with you. It's full-time on campus, fall or spring starts. Same with economics, fall or spring starts. And then our PhD program, honestly, we only have an intake every 2 years for that program. So for this admission cycle, we are not recruiting. We will start our recruiting again in September of 2025 for our intake in the fall of 2026. So that is a very basic overview. What I would encourage you to do is we have a pretty well laid out website. We have a lot of recordings up about each program that you can dive deep if you want to learn a little bit more about that. So let's jump into the application, and then I will definitely answer questions throughout the process. Again, my goal today is to give you some information that I think will be helpful in you putting your best application forward. So we're going to talk about the application in general. We're going to talk about transcripts, letters of recommendation, unofficial versus official transcripts, your GMAT versus GRE. We are an optional program for that. We'll talk about resumes. We'll talk about essays, all of those things, as well as our English proficiency policies. Okay, so here's my first suggestion, and it seems somewhat simple. Make sure you research the program that you're interested in and make sure you qualify for it. The reason that I said that is Masters in Management is a great example. We see a lot of students that apply for that program that have 3 to 4 years experience. You will automatically get denied from that program if you have that much experience because that program is designed for students with 0 to 1 year experience. The same could be said for the full-time MBA program as well as the Flex MBA program. If you're coming right out of undergrad, we're not going to accept you. We're looking for typically 2 years of professional experience. There may be a couple exceptions to that if somebody has a little bit of work experience and is incredibly academically qualified. But if you fall into that scenario, you probably want to set up a meeting with me and talk about it because I don't want to waste your time applying to a program that has certain levels of experience needed. Many of our specialty master's programs, like Masters in Business Analytics, Masters in Economics, they don't have a lot of restrictions to it, but some of them do. So you want to make sure before you're starting an application that you're obviously aligning your goals to what Lehigh is looking for out of each program. You also want to make sure your start terms align, right? Like you saw with our 1 year MBA program, that has one start per year, and that is in late June. So if you're looking to start in the spring semester for your MBA and you're looking for a full-time program, we don't have a path for you. So you just need to spend a little bit of time on each program. The application itself also doesn't need to be done in one sitting. Most students will start an application. We will get an alert that you've started your application, and then it's really up to you. You can kind of piece it together, fill information in as needed, add your recommenders, which we're going to talk about. And then when you're ready, you can submit the application. But we really are not going to start to be doing like a preliminary review of your application until you submit the application. You can see here, this is kind of a basic screenshot of what you're going to see in the application if you haven't started one. And as items become completed, you'll see that they change to a little bit of a bluish green color. So all of our programs have an essay, which we'll talk about. All of our programs require an essay. Some of our programs require an interview, which we will talk about too. For international students, and honestly for all students, English proficiency has to be determined. So if you studied in the United States, you've met your English proficiency. If you've done either another 2-year master's or a 4-year bachelor's degree. If you haven't studied in the United States, there's other ways that English proficiency can be determined, and we will go through those. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of the letters of recommendation and what that process looks like as well too. So let's talk about the resume first. When I talk to prospective students, one of the things I always say is there's certain parts of your application that are fixed or locked, meaning that you can't change them. Your transcript is what it is. Your resume is an interesting thing where obviously you can't really change your work history, but I think it's very important to spend a little bit of time on how you're presenting your resume. So number one, for any of our international students here today, while this is going to take a little bit of time, it could really make a difference for you, is making sure you format your resume in a US friendly format. And you may be saying, well, I don't know what that looks like. Research it. Spend the time to take your CV or your resume and put it into a template that you can easily find on Google or other search engines that is going to be more conducive to reviewing it from a US perspective. It's something we're going to have you do as an international student when you come here to Lehigh, but you have to think from a reviewer's perspective. Here in the United States, typically a resume would be 1 to 2 pages. We will sometimes see CVs or resumes that are 7 or 8 pages from other countries. And that's probably the norm in your country, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're applying to a business school in the United States, spending time on not only the format, but also the clarity of your resume is something that you can control. And one format that we talk a lot about here at Lehigh, and some of the top companies in the United States do, is what's called a STAR design. So if you've never heard of STAR, it stands for Situation, Task, Action, and Result. And in our MBA programs and our specialty master's programs, once our students arrive, we really talk a lot about STAR, where we actually will have you kind of on a spreadsheet build your professional stories in a STAR format. So if you're interested in working at Amazon, for example, and I think we now had 6 or 7 students in the last couple of years in MBA or master's level roles at Amazon. Amazon is notorious for forcing applicants during their interview process to be prepared with their STAR stories. So I'd encourage you to research that a little bit, even if you don't have a lot of experience. Maybe your very early career, maybe you've just done a couple internships. The STAR format is really going to allow us to concisely see what you were responsible for in whatever work experience you had. And here's like a really super simple example, but this is from topresume.com. Somebody in the insurance industry said this was kind of their bullet point. I worked on residential and commercial claims processes, which could be a significant cost to the business. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't tell me a lot. It doesn't tell me what the situation was, the action that I took, the results that I had, quantifying my success. Where you can see when this example was put into STAR format, I slashed claims costs by $1.2 million in 6 months after assessing damage, analyzing trends, and monitoring claim volumes to reveal over 250 fraudulent claims. Again, not that many more words, but makes much more of an impact that a company and a review committee from an admissions perspective would look at those things. 2 very, very differently, right? And that may be an extreme example, but all of us have those professional stories. It's taking the time to really think through how can I quantify some of my best career successes. And again, the beauty of this is that down the road, you're already thinking in this format for your MBA or for a specialty master's. So this isn't going to be something that's new to you when you start your program here at Lehigh. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Same with the essay. We do have directions in the application. We typically ask for 1 to 2 pages. We don't care if it's single space, we don't care if it's double space, but stay within those parameters. I would focus on the space that you need to answer the question, not the length. But the exception is do not go over 2 pages. And we do review a lot of applications, so it is really helpful for us to stay in that format. I would also recommend, and sometimes these seem like little things, but they can be things that really can make a difference, especially if you're looking at a number of different schools. Make sure you answer the question. I can't tell you how many times each year we can easily pull out a stock essay that number one, maybe ChatGPT wrote, or number two, we can tell that, hey, you know what, they're applying to multiple schools. This doesn't really address the question that we asked. It was just kind of a standard response that you provided. Um, that hurts you as an applicant, right? So if you're super interested in Lehigh, if they're on your short list of top schools, you really should be taking the time to really focus on responding to that question as best as possible. And then I always like to mention too that there is an optional question that talks about a time where you were able to overcome adversity. If you don't submit that, it doesn't count against you. It's just an opportunity for you to give a little bit more perspective if you're interested in doing that. And again, if you answered the 2 questions, the one required and the one optional, that would still need to be within the 2 pages. But again, I like to mention that not doing the optional question has no impact on your application. But again, a solid essay that really lays out an answer to the prompt and shows your ability to write, your ability to communicate, and just kind of how impressive you are as an applicant, right? We all have things that we think we're impressive about. So differentiating yourself amongst the masses, again, is an important thing in an essay in an admissions process, but also we can see that then carrying over into your career search or your career journey, because you understand what those differentiators are and they're coming out in your essay. Transcripts. One of the nice things at Lehigh is that we do allow unofficial transcripts for an admissions review. So an unofficial transcript would just be if you have a copy of your transcript from your college or university, you can list that university in your application and then you can upload it. And that is typically enough for an admissions review. If you get accepted to Lehigh, if you decide to come to Lehigh, we will absolutely require an official transcript to be sent to us directly from your college or university. And if you've gone to multiple schools, colleges, or universities, to be sent directly to Lehigh. That's an absolute requirement that needs to happen, so we can kind of authenticate everything before you begin the program. What I mentioned there is a couple things. So if you've attended multiple schools, so let's say you have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, when you're applying, you need to list both of those schools out, and we are going to need both transcripts. Another scenario is, let's say you have your bachelor's degree, but you took some courses at a community college, or you started at one school and you didn't finish, but then you started at another school and finished. You need to list each of those schools out, and we need transcripts from each college or university. So the rule of thumb I usually say is if you've taken kind of a credit-bearing class at a college or university, we want you to list those schools out and we want to see those transcripts. It'll just be a cleaner process that if you don't do that, what's going to happen is your application's complete. We begin to review it. We see that on your transcript that transfer courses came in. We're going to flag your application. We're going to list that other school, and then we're going to make you get it at that point. So it really can just slow down the process, especially as we get near application deadlines. So that is definitely an important piece. For international students, transcripts, we would need to see them in English. If you do not have them in English, we would require a WES, World Education Services course by course evaluation, or another NACIS accredited course evaluation. These, to be honest with you, can be incredibly helpful too. If you know, we definitely see them pretty frequently. But if you are an international student and you're really looking to put your strongest application forward, getting a WES or NACIS accredited course evaluation, while it will cost you a little bit of money, it shows a very clear investment in your educational future, and it also gives us a much clearer picture of what your GPA is converted into kind of US standards. We can do that. Like if we see a transcript from India or if we see a transcript from Nigeria, we have a way to do that internally. But, having one of those evaluations is incredibly, incredibly helpful for you. It just paints a much clearer picture for us of academically where you are from a US standpoint. So again, if you're trying to look, put your strongest application forward, it is not required, but it is encouraged to have those evaluations. It can be definitely helpful to you. Again, we mentioned about unofficial transcripts. And then again, we definitely are going to require official transcripts before you would begin. And if students are unable to produce official transcripts, that could rescind your offer of admission, that we wouldn't allow you to start without those official transcripts. So not to scare anybody, but it's just something that we definitely take very, very seriously. Again, things that you can control and can't control in your application. Letters of recommendation are one of the things that you can control. You do for really all of our programs, it's typically a standard 2 letters of recommendation that are required. And what that looks like is in the application, you would put the person's name and you would put the person's email address. And then what's going to happen is a communication is going to go out to them by email behind the scenes, asking them to rank you amongst your peers in a number of different areas. And then they have the ability to upload a letter of recommendation. Once they do that, again, behind the scenes, it gets sent back to our application system. And if you log into your application portal, you will see that that item has gone from required to received. You're not going to actually see the recommendation, but you can see that it has been completed. We follow that process. Many programs do that just because it gives us really the best response from somebody and also guarantees security as well too. We can never accept a letter of recommendation directly from an applicant. So what I usually encourage you to do is, number one, identify your recommenders. And really our preference for MBA programs is going to be either current supervisor or supervisors or previous supervisor or supervisors, because you need at least 2. For the MBA programs, we are not really interested in faculty recommendations. We want people that have worked with you in industry. Now, where that can be a little bit of a challenge, a couple things. If you're applying to our Flex MBA program, you're probably looking to stay within your company and maybe move up, maybe make a change at some point in the future. Most companies are very supportive of you going back to school, so it's typically not a problem. But let's say you're maybe looking to make a change and the MBA is the way to do that on a part-time basis. You don't want to let your supervisor know. That's okay. Maybe it's somebody else at your company that you trust that's in a little bit of a higher position than you are. Or worst case scenario, you go back to your previous company and you find 2 people that maybe supervised you in the past, or one supervisor and somebody that worked on a project with you, because we understand that can be a challenge sometimes. Um, for our one MBA program, kind of the same thing. It's definitely a little bit different that you're working full time, and you're thinking of exiting the workforce to come and do your MBA. You may not want to let your company know that at this point. Same scenario, previous company would be fine, or maybe somebody in a higher position that you trust that could provide a recommender at your current company. For our specialty master's programs, again, if you have work experience, fantastic. Same scenario applies as with the MBA, that find somebody, if you're willing to let your company know, great. If not, look at previous supervisors. But for some of our specialty master's programs, for students that are coming right out of undergrad, internship supervisor would be wonderful. Faculty members are acceptable as well too, just because you probably don't have that much work experience. The only exception, again, every program is really minimum of two letters of recommendation with a maximum of three. Our master's in management, again, early career only requires one letter of recommendation. And again, you control this, right? So you need to have a pretty good gauge on who recommenders would be good recommenders for you that can really speak to your abilities. Um, they don't have to have an MBA or a master's program, but just somebody that can really speak to how good of a candidate they think you could be is going to be really, really important. So don't overlook that. We look at everything holistically. So this is an area that, again, you control and could actually really help you from an application standpoint. And I promise I'm gonna run through this and then I'm gonna circle back and answer any questions that people have. So this is probably one of the most common question that we get, GMAT or GRE. We are optional. We are optional for all of our programs. So you are not required to submit a GMAT or GRE. It can help you. It could hurt you. I will tell you the majority of applicants in general are not submitting GMATs or GREs at this point. So if you weren't 100% sure, what I like to talk about is kind of the scenarios of where you may or may not need a GMAT or GRE. So the first scenario would be, let's say you have a really interesting background, and I'll be somewhat general with that, but maybe you have really interesting work experience, or maybe you went to a really good college or university, but your GPA is low. Our GPA is typically anywhere from 3.2 to 3.4 on a 4.0 scale. That is typically kind of our range across all of our programs for average GPA. So, if you're falling below a 3.0, on a 4.0 scale, you probably want to be considering a GMAT or a GRE. There could be exceptions to that if you studied something for your bachelor's degree that was like incredibly technical or engineering or computer science, possibly. But that's where maybe you and I probably need to talk a little bit, and I can try to give you some one-on-one advice on that. If you're above a 3.0, typically you typically probably don't need it, but again, it's a holistic approach. So if you have really interesting work history for the MBA program and you're over a 3.0, you probably don't need it. If you're in a more technical program like a financial engineering, it's all going to depend. And I know that's hard to say that as an applicant because you're probably looking for a clear-cut decision. But again, I look at it this way that like if you have a low GPA under a 3.0, it should be on your radar as something that you're considering. The other student or applicant that I would say could potentially need it is, let's say you studied, we'll pick on psychology. That was part of my undergraduate degree. So psychology, there's some quantitative components to it, but the reality is like you probably didn't have a lot of statistics. You probably weren't exposed to a lot of math in a program like that. So even if you did well academically, let's say you're at a 3.4 or 3.5, if we can't if we can't understand quantitatively, will you be okay in some of our programs? You may be a candidate for a GMAT or GRE. Those are really the two most common scenarios that I see. And then I would say the third scenario is really just the applicant that is looking to put their strongest application forward. Typically a top candidate, probably looking at multiple schools, probably strong GPA, maybe good work experience if it's the MBA program, looking for significant scholarship amounts. The GMAT a strong GMAT or GRE can help you with that and set you apart. But I just want to be very clear. We have a lot of students that are getting significant scholarships that do not have a GMAT or GRE. But hopefully that helps. I mean, those are really the three candidates that I typically see. It is possible, as I have on the slide, on this part of the slide deck, that the committee could look at your application without a GMAT or GRE and then say, look, we really like you, but there's that missing piece, and that missing piece is going to be a GMAT or GRE. That's not super common because we just don't have a lot of time to kind of pause somebody's review and then come back and do it. So I would say think of yourself in those three buckets. Highly competitive. The second bucket would be maybe non-business or technical major, but not a lot of quantitative classes. And then the third bucket would be a lot of promise, high potential, but did not do well academically previously. That's the three common buckets that I typically see for GMAT or GRE. Interview. So only two of our programs will require an interview. That is our full-time MBA program and our financial engineering program. For some of our programs, depending on where you studied, we may request an English language proficiency. We would let you know that, obviously. But definitely for the one MBA in financial engineering, we will require an interview. And really what that looks like is when you submit your application, you actually see kind of the interview checklist item come up after you submit the application. And we are not going to move on that interview until you've completed all of the other checklist items that you have. Once all of those are completed, myself or somebody on my team will reach out to you. We will schedule a Zoom interview. You'll be required to be on camera, make sure your audio and all of that is working beforehand, and we'll spend about 15 to 20 minutes together. And for both of those interviews, it's an opportunity for you to kind of personalize it a little bit more for those two programs. So we're going to ask you probably a lot of questions about your work experience, your academic background, and then also kind of your mindset for your future plans. Plans change, right? Like as people get into these programs, it's like all of a sudden the light bulb goes off and the idea that they had when they were coming in changes, and that's part of the process. We just more want to see that you have kind of a level-minded idea of why you're interested in this program at this point and where you kind of think you see yourself short term and long term. So that's some additional insights. I don't really tell people questions in advance, but short term and long term career goals are going to be an important component of that interview. And again, for English proficiency, we will reach out to you if you need that for whatever reason based on our English proficiency policy. And that leads into English proficiency. So Lehigh's actually pretty flexible with this. We do see some students needing kind of, again, this is more for international students at this point, but some students will need a TOEFL, a Duolingo, or an IELTS exam. Those are the three kind of English proficiency exams that we request. But here's who does not need it. So again, all students need to demonstrate English proficiency, including US citizens, right? And it can be done by two different pathways. The first pathway is if you completed an undergraduate degree from a US school, and we have some other countries listed there. So the United States, Canada, some of the Caribbean countries and territories, the United Kingdom. We have this all on our website. If you've completed the degree, bachelor's degree or a 2-year master's degree, you've met your English proficiency. If you've completed your degree, and this kind of gets in the pathway too, if you've completed your degree from kind of a secondary list of countries that we recognize are predominantly English speaking, countries such as India, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, South Africa. Again, if you've completed at least 75% of your degree there, meaning that like you didn't do 2 years in India and then 2 years in China, for example, we do see things like that. But if you've done that, 75%, if you drop down to the bottom here, typically a letter from your university stating that your curriculum was taught in English, if you share that with us, that is typically enough. We may require an interview at that point, but we'll take a look at it. What I can tell you is that sometimes if you are going to take a Duolingo or a TOEFL or an IELTS, it's another data point, so that can strengthen your application. And like I realize a lot of applicants from India speak very fluent English, but a lot of applicants from India also do provide an English language proficiency requirement. That can vary from country to country, but again, it can be a nice data point, but it is definitely not required as we recognize where English is taught across, or English is spoke across the world. So we have all this laid out on our application. When you submit your application, we would confirm all of this to you and let you know what you need and what you don't need. But there is a lot of information out there for us, and I think we do have a lot of flexibility in defining how English is proved. Stop for questions here momentarily. I just like to touch on a number of different starts. So for our spring semester, which we're actively recruiting for, we do have over on the left our Masters in Business Analytics, our Masters in Applied Economics, and our Masters in Financial Engineering, all full-time programs, all STEM designated. those applications are open. The application will remain open till December 1st. For international students, we suggest submitting by November 15th, if not earlier. We know in a lot of countries there can be visa delays, so the sooner the better is typically what I recommend. But we do have those applications open for the spring. In addition, I know we have some Flex MBA candidates that are on the call today. We have our spring application open for the Flex MBA program. Because Flex MBA is really US citizens only, we have a little more time. So it's a December 15th deadline for the Flex MBA program. When you look at our summer starts, back to the mid left here of the screen, our summer starts include our 1-year MBA, which is the one start for that program per year, and then also another Master's in Business Analytics start. We kind of work on rounds for that program, so the application is open. Our round 1, round 2, and round 3 deadlines are posted there. Again, for international students, the sooner the better. You should, if you're an international student, you should apply by April 15th, 2025 at the extreme latest. Again, back to the right, summer start for Flex MBA, again, May 1st. So we have a little bit of time there if you're thinking of starting in the summer. And then back to the lower left, our fall start programs, Masters in Management, Masters in Business Analytics, again, financial engineering and applied economics. You can see those deadlines. Again, for international students for the fall, May 15th. You would want to apply by May 15th or sooner for those programs. And then finally, for the Flex MBA, our fall start is typically our largest start. It's typically fall is the largest for Flex, followed by spring, followed by summer. If you're interested in fall 2025 for Flex, all of these applications are open. You would just need to apply by July 15th. And I should note for students that are applying for fall and summer starts, like you'll hear from us. It's not gonna be like you're not gonna hear from us till after July 15th for the Flex program. We are continuously reviewing applications every single week at this point for all of these programs. Again, to wrap up my presentation, some general tips and suggestions. Find ways to differentiate your application. It could be the GMAT or GRE if you're a strong test taker, but it's definitely not required. Really focusing and laying out your essay questions specific to Lehigh. We talked about those star stories on your resume, I think can really be a differentiator for you in resume format. Apply when you're ready. For our full-time programs, which tend to have some partial and full scholarships available, we tend to encourage applicants to apply earlier. That can be helpful as there's only so much scholarship money available, right? But we are scholarshiping students in our full-time programs throughout the entire year. And I will mention too, like, don't be afraid to engage with us. I oversee all of the MBA recruiting, so I'm always happy to meet on one-on-one. I can get you connected with Allison Toth if you're interested in the specialty master's programs. Allison kind of handles all of our specialty master's programs, and we're always happy to spend a couple minutes with you to answer your questions, whether it's through email or through a Zoom call. So don't hesitate to reach out with questions throughout the process. The clean resume, as I mentioned, responsibilities of internships or full-time positions in STAR stories is super helpful. And, I always like to end on transparency. I think that's important. So, for a lot of our applicants in the full-time programs, you may be looking at 5 different schools. And if Lehigh's at the top of your list, but let's say you've been admitted to other programs that are high caliber quality schools similar to Lehigh, let's have a conversation. It's always okay to do that. If you've been admitted to other schools that maybe aren't the quality or caliber of Lehigh, then maybe there's not a lot we can do. But I'm always happy to at least talk that through with you and have that conversation with all of our candidates. So that's my presentation. Hopefully it was helpful to you. I'm going to run back here at the top, and we had a couple questions come in, and if other people have questions, now would be the time to kind of drop those in. So I see we had some questions related to, let's see here. Give me a moment. Okay, so some GPA questions. So general questions about GPA with extensive work experience. Again, my typical rule of thumb is if you studied, let's say you studied business, and your GPA is below a 3.0 on a 4.0 scale, you likely need a GMAT or GRE. You're welcome to apply without it, but the outcome is likely that you will not be admitted. Work experience is important, but we need to make sure a student can academically get through the program to get to that next level of work experience. So I would strongly encourage people under a 3.0 on a 4.0 scale to definitely be considering a GMAT or a GRE. Great question though, and that's I think helpful for the group. We had some funding questions come in. Is there any funding graduate assistantships for financial engineering, business analytics? How do you apply for those? Yeah, that's a really good question. What I can tell you is that a lot of Lehigh's full-time programs are 1 year or 18-month programs. The challenge with that, the benefit is like you're done quicker, right? You're back into the workforce in that job a little bit quicker. The challenge is that you are limited a little bit to how much you can work on campus. Typically, students can work a maximum of 20 hours per week. That is kind of a general Lehigh rule. But then, based on the amount of credits that you're taking in a given semester, that can get further restricted down to 10 hours a week or to 5 hours per week. So I can tell you a lot of our full-time students do work on campus. They typically work 5 to 10 hours per week. Some of those could be in a graduate assistantship. Some of those could actually just be campus employment, that there is a lot of campus employment available. So what I tell students for our programs, unfortunately, is it is pretty rare to get an offer of admission with a graduate assistantship with it. It's possible to get employment here as a graduate student, but the reality is like that would not be part of your offer of admission. That would typically happen after you arrive at Lehigh, so it really can't be built into any of the funding calculations for our full-time program. So it is just something I like to be transparent, and I do think that's a really good question for the entire group. Bodie had asked, I have 9 years professional work experience. Can I go ahead with applying for the one MBA program? Yeah, absolutely. We have students in the 1 year MBA. Average work experience is about 6 years. The Flex MBA average work experience is about 8 years. But both of those programs, it's a minimum of 2 years. And we have students with 15 years experience or 17 years experience in those programs. So absolutely, that sounds like a good level of work experience. So you definitely would qualify to submit an application for that. Let's see some other questions here. Application fee waivers. That's a great question because I didn't talk about that. One of the nice things is we have a free application this year, so you don't have to request an application fee waiver from us. The application should not prompt you if you're applying in the College of Business or financial engineering, which is considered intercollegiate. You will not get prompted for an application fee charge. So it is completely free to complete it. So Abasola, great question. No application fee for this year. Some other questions. Ideal GMAT GRE score. These are great questions coming in for the Masters in Business Analytics program. That's a really good question. The GMAT and GRE has changed a little bit in the last year or two. So there was kind of an old GMAT range of scores would typically an average score was typically a good score that we would see for a lot of our programs would be like a 600 or above overall score. They changed the format about a year ago. It was called the GMAT Focus. Now it's the new GMAT. It's a little bit different. The scoring's a little bit different. If you were in, I would say like the 565, if you took the new test, they end in fives, 565, 575. That's about the equivalent to a 600. That's also a question that if you have a certain score and you want to email it to me, I can give you a little bit more advice. And before I forget, I'm going to drop my email address at the bottom here of the chat. But yeah, typically 565 or above. We do tend to look a little bit more at the quantitative score. So the quantitative subscore is typically important for us, especially if you did not do well quantitatively in your undergraduate degree or you didn't have a lot of quantitative experience. But that hopefully gives you kind of a general answer, but really good question. Do I need a research proposal for applied economics? Not as part of the application, no. There may be some research as part of the program. In our economics program, we do have some students that will apply and go on to our PhD in business and economics. But as part of the application process, no, you would not need any sort of research documentation. If you wanted to build that into your resume as something that you did previously, that would be fantastic. But we don't need that as like a separate attachment. We have a question from Amresh. What CGPA is required on a scale of 10? So I'm assuming that's in India, CGPA. Um, we don't have a specific answer to that. I mean, we do have a lot of students that are in the 7 to 10 range for CGPA, but we have some students a little bit below that as well too. Again, that's where it's going to be a little bit of a balance based on your previous work experience, if that's applicable. But again, if you're trying to figure out like, do I need a GMAT or GRE, that'd be a good question to email me and tell me a little bit more about your specific background, and I can give you some feedback. Let me just see here. Other really good questions. I appreciate this from the group. Separate application needed for the Dean's Scholarship. So the Dean's Scholarship, some of the programs have scholarships. The one MBA does that typically is associated with a stipend. You don't have to work, but it's in essence a full tuition scholarship plus a $10,000 stipend for the 1 year MBA program. We don't have a deadline for it. We have the ability to award a small number of those scholarships. So what I would encourage you to do is if your application is complete and you have all of the items required, I would submit the application as soon as you can. But we typically we try to award those early on in the year. But if we have really strong candidates throughout the year, we will consider that throughout the process. Again, it's just to be transparent. There's a small number of those available. But if you're a strong applicant, you don't need to apply. We will, for all of our programs, there's no application for scholarship needed. We will just kind of look on an individual basis if you're admitted to the program, and then we would let you know at the time of admission the scholarship that you've been awarded. Um, Brian, good question. What are the core values that Lehigh looks for prospective students? That's a great question. I don't know if I've actually ever been asked that. Little less of a tactical question, which I appreciate. So, I think our core values, I would say, we're interested in candidates. Obviously, high quality candidates is going to be the number one thing. As far as values go, you know, I'm super interested in somebody's professional background, and you may say, well, how does that from a value standpoint exist? But I do think that um, you know, it'll come across in your work experience. So I think we like independent thinkers. I think we like people that are driven, extremely driven. We like people that have the ability to articulate and communicate their values, and you can do that obviously through the application. I also think that we like people that think entrepreneurially, and that doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur, right? Many of us will not be entrepreneurs, nor do we want to be, but kind of the mindset of thinking like an entrepreneur, even in a large organization, being a change maker within an organization and being able to show that in your application, I think is incredibly important. And I think vision, your personal identity and your personal vision as far as where you're looking to go, the value that you see in this MBA degree, and kind of why it's the missing piece. And being able to articulate some of those components across any of our programs is going to be extremely valuable. So again, thank you. I really do appreciate that question. Pranav had asked, full-time MBA is 12 months. Yeah, a lot of our programs have some flexibility. And the reason for that is like with the 1 year program, if you're looking to do a concentration, it's about 13 months, usually June 25 start, August 26 finish. But we do also allow some flexibility that if you wanted to do a summer internship, and a number of students say, look, that could be an interesting pathway for me into a company, we are willing to work with you to sometimes extend a program up to 18 months. One of the unique things about our one MBA program, and we do this for a number of our specialty master's programs, is we don't have like a traditional 2 year full-time MBA program. So if we can offer a little bit of flexibility within certain parameters, we can try to do that. And the example I'll use, just because it's fresh in my mind, I had coffee yesterday with a former one MBA student who is at Amazon. He's in a MBA role, a product manager technical role at Amazon in Seattle. He was back in Bethlehem for a wedding. He graduated a few years ago, and one of his MBA classmates was getting married. And I appreciated that he came and stopped by, and we got to catch up for a little bit. And he was one of the students that did that. He applied to Amazon for their full-time MBA roles, got rejected for those roles. Saw that after Amazon hires for full-time, they open their MBA internship roles, applied for an internship, worked with our office to kind of extend his program to 18 months to create space for a summer internship, bet on himself, went to Seattle, did the MBA internship, got a return offer at Amazon, and relocated his family to Seattle. So it's not the majority of students. The majority of students will do the 1 year MBA in about 13 months, get the job that they want, and move on with their career. It's a nice fallback option if you need it. Or for certain people that need to pivot, sometimes an internship could help. For certain international students, it could help. But what makes us unique in that marketplace is the ability to kind of make that conversion after you get here to say, okay, and my mindset is 13 months, but I have that safety net based on what happens in the US economy, which none of us really know that. So again, really, really good question. Um, Let's see, I'm probably not going to be able to get all of these. I only have 3 minutes left. As far as like financial engineering prerequisites, Guide had asked that. Guide, I'd encourage you maybe to drop an email to business@lehigh.edu or send it to me. We could take a look. We do have students, if you studied accounting, for example, we do have accounting students in that program. But we'd want to kind of take a look at your specific situation. If students do need prerequisites, we can kind of build those into your degree plan while you're here at Lehigh. But financial engineering is probably our most technical quantitative program. So it just depends on kind of what you studied previously. So feel free, drop us an email, business@lehigh.edu, and we can try to find some more information out about your background. Um, and let me see, I'm going to take one more question here. Pranav had asked, wanted to circle back on if we have, not sure what TAT is, on hearing back on the decision once an application is complete. Oh, timeline, possibly turnover time. Thank you. Yeah, great question. We typically, once an application is completed, submitted, it does typically take maybe 1 to 2 weeks to get an interview scheduled with me. Once your application is completed, we typically will send it the following week to the admission committee. That can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to get reviewed. So yeah, I would say like if you submitted your application by the end of September, let's just use that as an example. We're not going to wait till the end of round one, which would be December 1st for one MBA. We're not going to wait that long. We're gonna then start to review your application, and it'd probably be 4 to 6 weeks is my guess after you submit. And we can give you, if you need a little flexibility, like if you have waiting on another offer, for example, and the timing of our offer doesn't always line up, we can try to give you a little bit of flexibility as needed. I have 1 minute left, so I'll just address the last question. Our MBA program, the 1 year full-time MBA, is a STEM designated program when you pursue business analytics or supply chain management as a concentration. If you do the 1 year MBA and you pursue financial management, marketing, or our general business track, it is not STEM designated. So we do the STEM designation through our concentrations. Okay. This is probably one of the best webinars I've done in a while, so hopefully it was helpful to you guys. I appreciate all the questions. It makes it a lot more enjoyable for me. We're just at the beginning of our admissions cycle right now, so feel free to register for other sessions. We have some great resources, as I said, on our website. We actually yesterday just implemented an option on our pages where you can actually live message some of our current students. I always say, as charming as I think I can be, the reality is I know you actually want to talk to students that are living and breathing the programs right now. So we have that up for all of our full-time programs, so feel free to take advantage of that. We have a virtual tour where you can actually hear some of our students speaking, and you can see our facilities, both for online and on campus. And a lot of great recorded information sessions on career development, outcomes, things like that. So you've been an awesome group. Look forward to engaging with all of you throughout the year. and hope to see your application in the near future. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.